Christians think that man's original sin tossed the whole world into chaos, a world full of evil and suffering, that it's somehow man's fault that there are earthquakes and childhood cancer, right, Cliff Connectley?
Genesis chapter 3 records a fall. It records how the good creation is corrupted. So you were born, and I am born, into an unfair, messed up, corrupt world. Not because God created it that way, but because we human beings told God, get lost. He partially honors our request, takes a step back from planet Earth, and chaos erupts.
Cliff, I wonder if you remember that it was God who cursed the world, not man, but we'll get into that. What do you think, Wes Huff?
We choose to voluntarily to decide that we as the creature know better than the creator, which is an act of eternal treason.
So we reject God because we think we know better. Got it. Let's break it all down, shall we? And put these ignorant accusations to rest once and for all. With these accusations dead, apologists don't have much left. Hi everyone, I'm H.G.Roberts, deconverted Christian after 25 years and author of On Monsters and Phantoms, and here we talk about religious trauma and how the Bible itself ties us up in knots, leads to confusion, anxiety, fear, doubt, depression, emotional oblivion, mental paralysis, and ultimately trauma. I have a master's degree in mass communication, so I'm specifically interested in the messages the Bible communicates to us today, the cognitive filters we use to interpret those messages, and finally, the harmful impact those messages have on our self and worldview. I want to set the stage that what we'll be looking at today is what I call rapid-fire, cliche, hot dog stand religious rhetoric. Not only does it miss the mark theologically, but it triggers those of us who have experienced religious trauma and religious abuse. I'll explain why throughout this video. We'll start with Cliff's foolish accusations, and we'll take it line by line, and we'll think this stuff through. It isn't hard to miss, and it's intellectually dishonest to not address it truthfully.
Genesis chapter 3 records a fall. It records how the good creation is corrupted. So you were born, and I am born, into an unfair, messed up, corrupt world. Not because God created it that way.
All right, we'll stop there for a second. And we'll grant that God originally created the world fair, not messed up, and uncorrupted. But let's read Genesis 3:14-19 to best determine how this world got so unfair, messed up, and corrupt. Christians will say that man's original sin messed things up. Well, you'd be dead wrong. Stop giving man the power you want your God to have. It's like this. If your dog pees on your carpet against your wishes because you haven't yet trained him to go outside, then, as a consequence, or rather a curse, you angrily stuff your dog into a garbage bag, drive him 20 miles out to the woods, and release him into the wild with no food or water, essentially leaving him for dead. Then you drive home. Will animal control blame the dog for winding up in the woods, starved and neglected? Sure, the dog peed on your carpet and maybe you should have trained him better, but is it the dog's fault that he's now lost and terrified in the woods? Did the dog stuff himself into the garbage bag and drive the car out to the woods? No, you did. You're fully responsible for the consequences you levied and the actions you took in response to your bad dog, which I would argue are unnecessary and excessive. You are accountable. The dog had neither the resources nor the wherewithal to levy those consequences, or rather, curses. And by the way, I love dogs. I have two myself, and as you can see, I let them on the couch. Even trying to articulate this analogy made me feel gross, but I think it actually compares well with our situation and relationship to God. Let's read from Genesis chapter 3. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this," deceived Eve, "cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." Okay, so we have God doing or orchestrating a couple of things that were not present in reality before. Note that he now causes the serpent to crawl on his belly and eat dust, which apparently is a massive fundamental anatomical and dietary change to the creature. This was not the serpent's doing, this was God's doing. We also see God introducing enmity where it wasn't before, not just between Eve and the serpent, or devil as many interpret, but also their offspring. So God's curse of enmity here is passed down from generation to generation. Didn't have to be passed down, but God wanted to ensure the extension of the suffering, of the conflict or enmity he set into motion. This was God's idea, not man's or Satan's. It was God's curse. Nobody held a gun to his head. I wonder if this God-ordained enmity has led to any unfairness or corruption. I wonder if it's messed anything up. God is creating the future paradigm of our existence, and lucky for us, it'll be filled with enmity now. Didn't have to be, and he wants all the credit for it. But let's keep going. To the woman, he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Again, through his curses, God introduces excruciating pain where it wasn't before. Eve didn't ask for the pain. The devil didn't whisper, hey, God, give her excruciating pain in childbirth. Adam didn't playfully rib God and snicker, make her suffer, Lord. Again, God's idea. He's 2 for 2 in creating a fallen world for us to live in. The next part of God's curse says, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Apologists are all over the map on how to interpret this line. Some say God shifted the power dynamic so that Eve, or women in general, would now be subservient rather than equal to men. And we'd now see this power struggle, this tension, this quest for control manifest throughout our lives. Wonderful. Didn't have to happen this way, but God ensured that it would. Here's the irony. Christians will say that creating this hierarchy was not God's ideal, but rather a consequence of the fall. God had to do it. Fine, I'll give you that it may have been a consequence and that God was within his rights to curse in this way. But God did the cursing such that it would result in this shift, this new unfairness in a new inegalitarian society. Man didn't make this happen. Satan didn't. God did. But at the same time, Christians will say that this was not God's ideal. We know that Christianity teaches as an ideal, a God-breathed righteous paradigm, that men, particularly husbands, are to be leaders in the home and that wives are to submit to their husbands, indicating a clear God-established patriarchal hierarchy. I've always heard it said that men are to be a covering for their wives. We also see this playing out in leadership roles in the church. A majority of church leaders are men, and many churches don't even allow women to occupy leadership roles. They will tell you that this patriarchy was God's plan, his design from the beginning, not a result of the fall. Paul may disagree, but that's another debate for another time. Every Christian church I ever attended reinforced this patriarchal hierarchy as the ideal God established before the foundation of the world. Some call it his perfect plan. If true, why would God then cast a curse that disrupts his own objective ideals? Make up your mind, Christians. Is a patriarchal hierarchy God's ideal or a result of his curses? If you take what the Bible actually says, it's the result of a curse. And we're 3 for 3 on God creating an unfair, messed up, and corrupt world, a world that didn't exist before God spoke it into existence because of his angry curses. But there's more. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. Phew. Man, look at all the hardship and pain this loving and omnibenevolent God who desires nothing but the best for you introduced to the world that wasn't there before. The average Christian will say we have childhood cancer and earthquakes because of this particular set of curses. Thanks, God. Again, Adam didn't ask for this. Adam didn't separate and move the tectonic plates and create abnormal cell division. Eve didn't. Neither of them could supernaturally cause these things to manifest. Man didn't manipulate genetic code such that some of us are born with debilitating neuromuscular diseases. God did all that through his curses. And Satan didn't offer to help God out here. Nope, this was all God. He set all this in motion. Our sin didn't. If you think it did, you're crediting this philosophical concept of sin with actual agency. Nonsense. God is the agent with the power to manifest these horrible things. Sure, you can argue that he's responding to our sin, but it's the response that's under fire here. The fallen world we live in isn't demonic. It has nothing to do with Satan and his demons. It's God ordained. God did this. He set it all in motion this way. He made it so that we have sin natures that persist generation after generation. You think any of those curses on Adam contributed to our unfair, messed up, and corrupt world? I get confused sometimes. Which is worse, man's sin or God's curses as a result? Which ultimately has the greater power to change things, to make them go from good to bad? Man's sin, us peeing on God's carpet, or God's curses, God bagging us up and hauling us to the woods? You're underestimating the grievousness of man's sin, HG. No, we'll get to that. Make no mistake, these are God's curses. They are meant to hurt, harm, and destroy. Do you think serving a God who intentionally curses in this way causes trauma? Do you think Christians who examine this closely and stumble upon this truth that contemporary Christianity doesn't want you to see might be a reason we deconvert? It was for me, and it is for so many others. When I was diagnosed with my debilitating neuromuscular disease in 2011, it came with probably a year's worth of extreme nerve pain in my feet, the kind that takes your breath away and makes you wish you were unconscious so you didn't have to endure it. And all the while I was sitting there in absolute agony, my feet raging with stabs of fire. And while I literally watched my arm and leg muscles atrophy day over day, all I could think about, even as a Christian at the time, was how God was cursing me with this pain, this disease. I was terrorized by it, despite rehearsing all the pretty scriptures like, in this world you will have trouble and all those things, you know those. It didn't help. I know it helps some, but it doesn't help everyone. You can see this video to understand why. Let's play a game. What if God hadn't cursed the world? Let's say Adam and Eve still bit the fruit. Let's say then God said, it's okay, you two. I know I haven't yet bestowed you with the knowledge of good and evil, so it would have been impossible for you to know the difference between obedience and disobedience. And I know you could not have possibly known that this disobedience you didn't know about would levy such immediate and harsh consequences for you and everyone born after you. And had you known all that, maybe you would have chosen differently, since you would have been aware of the consequences that I kept from you. Maybe it would have been more fair of me to allow you to exercise your free will responsibly, by showing you all the potential options and consequences so you could have made an informed choice. And I know it was me who allowed this crafty serpent into my perfect garden to intentionally deceive you. I set all this up before time and my perfect sovereignty. So how about this? I forgive you. Let's just let the bite of the fruit go. Y'all didn't know any better. I still have to banish you from the garden, and I'm still going to give you limited free will, but I'm not going to curse you and stack the deck against your offspring by ensuring they are made wicked and evil in the womb, such that they are born already sinful and inherently rebellious. I'm going to ensure that your free will leads to love for me, not because I'm making you robots, but because I know what's best for you, and I always do what is good and right, and I always work all things for good. It is better for you that you love me rather than risk going to hell by rejecting me through your free will. Because of my very nature, because I am all loving, I will not curse you for doing something you didn't know was wrong. And I know that cursing you and the world will make it unfair, messed up, and corrupt. What kind of world do you think we'd have if that is how this played out? What kind of world do you think we'd have had God not cursed it and ensured that our sin natures are perpetuated generation after generation? Do you think we'd still be born into this unfair, messed up, and corrupt world Cliff claims is our fault? Do you think it'd be any different? Do you think it'd be different if the God of all love used his unlimited power to still give us free will, but the inability to sin, like he'll do in heaven, meaning it's possible and it's his ultimate desire? Let's think of the Genesis flood. Before God caused it, he regretted making man. Whoops, I guess God didn't see that coming. But when the flood was over, God surveyed his vast destruction and then made a promise to never do such a barbaric and atrociously horrific thing again. So our gentle God hangs a rainbow in the sky to remind himself and us that he'll never again be so cruel. We see God make a covenant with himself to be more merciful to man in the future, that all the flood destruction wasn't necessary. It certainly didn't solve anything, as we still have a sin problem today. But that aside, my point is we see God bend to his own sense of mercy, maybe even catching himself by surprise at just how horrific the flood really was, along with him now favoring stability over destruction. The scriptures portray God as stumbling upon the realization that his unlimited power must be restrained and controlled lest he overreact in the future. Square this with levying curses in the garden and willfully perpetuating generation after generation original sin. God destroys the world in a flood, recognizes realizes that was a terrible and excessive thing to do, decides to turn over a new, more merciful leaf, so he hangs a rainbow in the sky as a promise that he'll never do something that terrible again, though I'd argue he does, as he then goes on to genocide nations and send plagues to kill Egypt's firstborn. But maybe all that's the light version of God's new leaf destructive wrath. Anyway, does he not recognize that his garden curses, which still persist today, are far more destructive than any worldwide flood? These curses, this paradigm of a fallen world, this imbuing of original sin in all of us ever born, this perpetuating of our sin nature, the pain, the toil, the enmity, results in more and more people suffering on earth and then condemned to eternal conscious torment with every day that passes. As awful as it was, the flood was one and done. Our sin problem has lasted for thousands and thousands of years as we try to navigate a world God cursed with pain, toil, and enmity. Many have died and will die, having rejected Christ because of the curse of the perpetuation of our sin nature. I'll bet you far less people died in the flood and supposedly went to hell than have been sentenced to hell since and will be sentenced to hell in the future. God's curses are worse than the flood, which I'd argue his curses caused. His curses are the most tragic and destructive thing that he has ever done to the planet and man. It's that simple. Where's the rainbow for promising never to curse the world again, given we got a pretty rainbow promising to not flood the world again? HG, that rainbow is Christ. So you admit that Christ is the solution to a problem God created. And if that's true, then Christ should have been immediate after Eve took that first bite. We shouldn't be in this unfair, messed up, and corrupt world thousands of years later, and could be for thousands more. Apologists, the answer to why there's evil and suffering in the world is because God cursed us and it. This is his design. He could have corrected and restored the moment Eve took her bite, but instead, he cursed.
We human beings told God, get lost.
Nope. Find me anywhere in the garden narrative where Adam and Eve told God to get lost. We read about their shame and remorse. In fact, God kicked them out of the garden, not the other way around. It was God who told man to get lost. And I remind you that Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent. To be deceived means you don't know that you're being tricked. Couple that with they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, and that doesn't sound anything like telling God to get lost. It's a convenient narrative apologists spin today to help sell the cure for a disease God caused, and the cure is the same God. I can tell you this, when all the walls of my collapsing faith crashed down and I had to admit I could no longer believe in Christianity, not once did I say, get lost, God. Those years were some of the most traumatic of my life, and through it all, through all my tears and fear, I prayed the opposite of get lost. I prayed for God to help me see his truth, because the more I studied and read the Bible and allowed myself to think critically about it, the more clouded my faith became, the more things didn't add up. I was aware of this, and it was terrifying. I cried out to God every day for him to draw near, not get lost. In fact, to this day, I'm open to this God of the Bible drawing near in a way that he knows will make sense to me, given all the religious trauma I've suffered. I'm still waiting. I don't believe he exists, so I'm not telling him to get lost, but I remain open.
We human beings told God, get lost. He partially honors our request, takes a step back from planet Earth, and chaos erupts.
Again, nope. When did Cliff become a partial deist instead of a theist? Will Cliff start denying all the times God willfully intervened to create the chaos, a specific outcome of destruction? Let's look at a few scriptures to see if Cliff's right, that God honored our request and stepped out of the way and let us wreak our own chaos and destroy ourselves. Ezekiel 5:13, then my anger will cease and my wrath against them will subside, and I will be avenged. And when I have spent my wrath upon them, they will know that I, the Lord, have spoken in my zeal. Deuteronomy 32:39-41. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill and make alive. I wound and I heal. I will sharpen my flashing sword, and my hand takes hold on judgment. I will take vengeance on my adversaries, and will repay those who hate me. Isaiah 13:11, I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pomp of the arrogant, and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. Revelation 16:5-7, you are just in these judgments, O Holy One, you who are and who were, for they have shed the blood of your holy people and your prophets, and you have given them blood to drink as they deserve. Romans 9, 17, 18, for Scripture says to Pharaoh, I raised you up for this very purpose, that I might display my power in you, that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. Therefore God has mercy on whom he wants to have mercy, and he hardens whom he wants to harden. How about 2 Thessalonians 1, 6, 9? God is just. He will pay back trouble to those who trouble you. He will punish those who do not know God and do not obey the gospel. They will be punished with everlasting destruction and shut out from the presence of the Lord. This sounds like a God who's still very active in our harsh reality, not a God who's stepped back and remains aloof. And lest we forget, it is this same God who unleashed Satan and his demons on this world, this same God who sustains Satan and his demons rather than blot them out. And he gives Satan the keys or dominion to our minds so we can be manipulated. There's no stepping back and out of the way about all that. God drives the train of chaos, right, Catherine Crick?
And so I know many eyes are opening up to see the reality of demonic oppression and the reality of Jesus, our deliverer. The reason demons were leaving people as the disciples were ministering is because they were given by Jesus authority over them. Now, every believer has a measure of authority. As soon as you become a believer, you have authority over your own spiritual health and life. Meaning, like when the devil tries to come in your mind, you have the power to reject him, to resist him, and he has to flee.
Oh, some of you Christians don't agree with Catherine Crick? Well, take that up with her. Don't leave the comments in my videos. If you disagree with her, they won't do you any good. She's in love with your same God. But apologists like Cliff will continue to insist that man is ultimately responsible for our fallen world where all this demonic possession happens. Demonic possession wasn't Adam's idea. Hell, it wasn't even Satan's idea. It was God's. Please stop giving man and Satan all the credit for what God wants credit for. God tells us in Isaiah 45:7 that he created evil. Call it calamity or discord if you want to soften the blow and sleep better at night. That's still God declaring that he creates chaos and that he created an unfair, messed up, and corrupt world. God has all the resources and power to make the world what it is. If he's all sovereign and omniscient, then he's ultimately responsible regardless of what man has done. We've peed on God's carpet, so he's bagged us up and thrown us into the woods. Yeah, HG, but Christ will fix all that. Have it, Christians. It only affirms that your God had to devise a solution to a problem he created, and the solution itself is still flawed. Don't damn us just to save us. You can see this video if you want to learn more or explore that trail. And finally, let's not forget about our friend Wes Huff and what he said.
We choose to voluntarily to decide that we as the creature know better than the creator, which is an act of eternal treason.
I won't spend a lot of time breaking this one down, but to say that I know better than the creator is absurd. I don't believe the God of the Bible is real. Too many contradictions, incongruencies, and irreconcilable claims for that God to exist. So I don't claim to know more or less or better than that creator God because I don't grant that he exists. However, if that God does somehow exist, he obviously knows more than me, and he knows better than me. He created everything. He runs the universe. If he knows better than me, then he knows what it would take for this deconverted skeptic who was so traumatized by him that I wanted to commit suicide to come around and see him as real and loving and safe. I currently do not and cannot see him that way. And I'm not alone. I speak on behalf of everyone traumatized by this God and Christianity. That's not a reflection of me knowing better than him. That's me walking away to preserve my life and sanity. And I fully submit that if there's an ultimate transcendent creator of this universe and our shared reality, I grant that it knows better than me, and it knows more than me. Yahweh has a lot to overcome for me to believe that he's real, good, and wise. If he is real, I even then wouldn't say I know better. I'd say that I know different. My experience with him was ultimately awful and destructive after 25 years of devoted and faithful service. That narrative is well spelled out in my 10-video series on religious trauma, so Christians, don't come at me here without understanding the full picture. If this God exists, I couldn't know better than him, but I can judge him by his own actions and behaviors through the cognitive filters I've developed as a melancholic empath, and I can deem him to be abominable. Again, Wes's comment is just another shallow street apologetic that rings absolutely hollow, and it's meant to put the listener on the defensive to try to win an argument. Wes, as a child, when you've been physically and sexually abused abused by a bigger, stronger, older male. It's far too easy to spot an abuser. Please stop defending this abusive God. I do know better than him when it comes to protecting myself from an abuser. Thanks for being here, everyone. First things first, I want to thank Becca Yoli and Susan Graham each for purchasing a copy of my memoir on monsters and phantoms. You both are regular visitors to my channel, and you offer insightful, encouraging comments. Together, we're building a community. I appreciate both of you and your support, and I look forward to hearing from you after you've read the book. Happy to share your review on my website. I know many of you have purchased my memoir, which is linked to below. So going forward, if you let me know in the comments, I'd be honored to publicly thank you. As you all know, I don't have Patreons or sponsors, so the best way to support my work is to purchase my memoir, in addition to liking, subscribing, sharing, and leaving a comment. So everyone, let me know your thoughts on this one today, especially if you've suffered from religious trauma. I try to put out a new video each week where we take a deep dive into what religious trauma is, how it forms, in whom it's most likely to form, and what we can do about it if it does form. If you'd like me to cover a specific topic, let me know in the comments. And if you're new here and curious about religious trauma, or think you may be suffering from it, well, take a look around, explore the channel to see what other topics I've covered and what resources are available to you. Until next time, let's continue to catalyze a conversation together about religious trauma, to let those who suffer from it know that there's hope, and to let those who dismiss it know that it's real.